With the relative strength of this cornerback class, and also factoring in the Eagles' long-term need at the position, as well as where they're currently slotted to pick within the first 2 rounds of the draft, there's a good chance that the Eagles will take a corner early. So let's take a look at some of the top prospects available. And before you say that the Eagles will never pick a corner in the first round, check out the link in the description for a more detailed article I wrote about the Eagles' recent draft history. The first corner we're going to talk about is Terrion Arnold from Alabama. Now, admittedly, if you read mock drafts at this time, it appears that Arnold is going to be gone before the Eagles' selection at 22, although this is a somewhat recent phenomenon, thanks in part to Daniel Jeremiah ranking Arnold as the top corner in this class. He's the most influential of the draft analysts, and while Arnold was highly regarded before DJ's stamp of approval, he wasn't really talked about as the top corner prospect until around that time. Still, that's just one man's opinion, and there is a chance that Arnold could fall some, considering that when you look at all of the corners on paper, Arnold hasn't been as good in coverage, and it's somewhat of a projection of his potential that hasn't been fully realized yet. When you do look at the film, Arnold flashes all of the traits that you want in a corner. He's fast, physical, and extremely fluid. He can play press, he can play off, and he can mirror any type of route on the field. His burst is excellent and allows him to make a ton of plays on the football, and he has tremendous recovery speed if he is beat early. He shows up and makes impact plays in the run and screen game with excellent ability to defeat blocks in a multitude of ways. I'm not going to spend too much time on him because, like I said, he's probably not falling to the Eagles pick, but I'll highlight a few plays to show some of his ability. Here we see Arnold matched up with Ladd McConkey from Georgia. He's one of the best route runners in this class, and it's pretty much a lock to go on day 2 of the draft. Ladd's initial release gets Arnold to step and shift his weight to the outside for a moment, but Arnold has great balance, quick feet, and leg strength to recover and slide back into position. Arnold is able to get his hand back on Ladd's hip to feel the route, and good eye discipline prevents him from seeing the head and shoulder fake that the receiver is giving. Arnold shows good hip mobility and leg strength to sink, decelerate, and then re-accelerate out of the break with no wasted steps to smother the route and get the deflection. I want to show some more of Arnold's mobility, this time on a quick screen. First, his burst and core strength shows up to beat a block, while at the same time getting held. He then gets juked, but let's stop the tape right here. This is a tough position for anyone to make a play, but his hip mobility shows up in a way that allows him to sink, pivot, and hold on for the tackle despite the precarious position he was in. On a different run play, Arnold is aggressive coming downhill to fill the alley, which forces the receiver to bounce the run back outside. We can see how well Arnold is able to detach his lower half from his upper half, giving him the ability to quickly change directions. Those fluid hips show up in coverage when he needs to turn and run with wideouts as well, but this was a great example of that ability. Arnold has good ball skills, ranking 33rd out of 201 corners in the Power 5 conferences and forced incompletion rate over the past 2 seasons. As I mentioned, his burst allows him to quickly close on passes, and he is able to climb the ladder to contest jump balls. I do think there are times where he's looking to play the back shoulder fade when he could get his head around for a better chance to get a turnover, and overall his technique could be more polished so that we see the same consistency that his teammate Kool-Aid McKinstry has shown. But Arnold was a safety prospect that converted to corner in 2022. You don't often see players switch positions in that direction, and there is a huge learning curve to playing corner. But Arnold was still selected as a first-team All-American by the Associated Press in 2023, and he has so much talent and good plays on tape that you can understand why he has gained so much buzz lately. His skill set also allows him to play in multiple spots for a defense, further enhancing his value. Arnold has a profile of a high-end corner in the NFL, and if he does somehow fall to 22, the Eagles would be wise to select him. Quinyon Mitchell enters the NFL draft as a 2-time All-American for the Toledo Rockets. Though he played in a weaker conference, he was extremely productive during his time in college. Among the 204 qualifying corners in the Group of 5 conferences over the past 2 seasons, he ranks in the top 5 in almost every major statistical category, including first in forced incompletions, second in interceptions, to go along with another 8 dropped interceptions, and second in yards per target. He had solid measurements at the Senior Bowl with a height of 6 foot and 3/8 inches and a weight of 195 pounds. His arm length is slightly below average at 31 and 1/8 inches, but it's not a hindrance to his game. His film matches the stats. Mitchell is an extremely explosive athlete with very good long speed, burst, and acceleration to go with fluid hips and good agility. You can see that long speed play out here as he chases down a ball carrier to save a touchdown. At Toledo, Mitchell aligned almost exclusively in off coverage while mixing in a good amount of catch technique, which is something you don't often see from outside corners. And off coverage, Mitchell showed patient feet feet in his pedal with a tremendous burst to close on passes in front of him. He often kept a good relationship with the receiver in his cushion, not flipping his hips early to bail, and combined with his elite burst, there were several reps where he had to slow down to not overrun the pass. Whether the wideout is in front of him, or he has to transition from a crossover run to break on curls, out routes, short or intermediate end breakers, Mitchell has the twitch and body control necessary to close on any type of throw. On deeper passes, Mitchell has the top gear necessary to keep up with even the fastest of receivers, and he does a good job locating the ball down the field. When the ball is in the air, he is cool, calm, and collected, and he's usually attacking the ball at the highest point. He was essential to the Rockets' defense, as their style of play often led to Mitchell having very little safety help deep. On the flip side, Mitchell hardly played press coverage in college, with only 56 reps in press during his 918 coverage snaps during the past 2 seasons. This looks like a player choice, as his teammate on the other side of the field, Chris McDonald, was in press on 352 reps during that same time span. Mitchell has the tools to play more press, but he's not nearly as polished or comfortable playing press as he is in off coverage. He's often too quick to open his hips instead of moving laterally with initial release of opposing wideouts. He needs to do a better job of trusting his transition and recovery speed. Here is a great example of that against Miami of Ohio. He immediately flips his hips and gives the receiver a free release, but he executes a tight speed turn and shows off his speed and ball skills to get back in phase and get the PBU. He got away with it in college due to superior athleticism, but he'll need to refine his technique in the NFL. There's always some level of concern with small school players transitioning to the NFL due to little exposure to top-end talent, but Mitchell answered a lot of those questions at the Senior Bowl. He was widely considered the best defensive player there, and he also worked in press a significant amount. This rep against Roman Wilson was particularly impressive. Wilson has legit speed, running a 10.68 100-meter dash in high school, yet Mitchell is able to transition smoothly, stop, and then restart against the stutter and go in the blink of an eye, and press to Wilson's upfield shoulder. That's impressive athleticism. Mitchell showed a lot of good stuff in press at the Senior Bowl, but there's still room for him to clean up his technique, and I expect he will in the NFL. There's also some other areas in his game to work on. There are times where his aggressiveness to jump routes can be used against him on double moves, and there's some reps on film where he gets on his heels late in his pedal. But those are things that can be corrected. His athletic profile is something that can't be taught though, and that's what separates him from most of the other corners in this class. Mitchell's burst also shows up well in the run and screen game, or when attacking swing routes to backs in the flat. In the open field, his acceleration allows him to close space quickly to prevent much yak. He generally does a good job coming to balance and getting guys to the ground in these scenarios. As a tackler and in run support, Mitchell is willing and able to get the job done. I wouldn't say he's the most physical attacking blockers or someone that is going to lay the boom like Devin Witherspoon, but he does what he needs to do. Against bigger backs or tight ends, he's more likely to go low or rely on catching and dragging his opponent down as opposed to throwing his shoulder and exploding through with his hips. But his 10% missed tackle rate in college is solid, and he's not someone that you'll have concerns about in that area. At the end of the day, if Mitchell is available at 22, then he'd be a great option for the Eagles. The only problem is, I'm not sure he will make it that far in the draft. His work at the Senior Bowl answered many questions, and he's likely to continue his rise as the draft process continues. He'll need to clean up some things in his technique and get more confident and polished in press, but for a position that requires high-end athletic traits to really stand out, Mitchell has all of that and more. The next guy that I would talk about is Nate Wiggins, but I've already done a video about him. Click the link at the end of the video for an in-depth breakdown on the player that I think is the most polished and pro-ready cover corner in this draft. One of the more popular and well-known players in the draft, Kool-Aid McKinstry is an experienced and highly productive corner from the University of Alabama. He started earning time as a freshman in Nick Saban's defense, which speaks to his ability and football intelligence. He has some very impressive stats to back up his film, ranking second in forced incompletions the past 2 seasons out of over 201 qualifying corners in the Power 5. To go along with that, he allowed the 8th lowest yards per cover target, 8th lowest rate of receptions longer than 15 yards, and 20th lowest passer rating allowed in that same time frame. Alabama lists McKinstry at 6'1" and 195 pounds, so he has more than enough size to compete in the NFL. He has good quickness, balance, hip fluidity, and change of direction skills, though he looks to have better short area speed than long speed. He has good play strength, with several reps of him defeating blocks against tight ends and tackling bigger running backs in space. He is one of the most consistent players at the position in the draft and has very good technique, particularly as a press corner. When in press, he's incredibly patient with his feet. It is rare to find reps where he panics or prematurely opens his hips steps to give the receiver a free release. He consistently takes at least one 45-degree kick slide before getting into a crossover run. This keeps him in a good position to redirect in the scenarios where wideout pushes in one direction before going back the other way. Right here is a good example of this. Kool-Aid takes 2 shuffle steps, and when the receiver comes back inside on a slant, he's able to get back in position because he didn't completely flip his hips to run vertical. I know it seems simple in slow motion, but so many young corners just immediately open up their hips and put themselves in a bad position. And it's not like you won't find reps of every other corner doing the correct things at times, but McKinstry is so consistent with his technique that he's rarely out of position. This is extremely important for Kool-Aid because, unlike Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, and Nate Wiggins, he doesn't have that extra gear to recover against fast wideouts if he's beat early. On this play against Texas A&M, we see McKinstry matched up with one of the fastest receivers in the SEC. This is Evan Stewart, who ran a 10.58 100-meter dash in high school. He gets a free release, and Kool-Aid can't keep up with him. Later in that game, we see those two matched up again, and again, we see Stewart start to pull away, but because Kool-Aid takes a good angle to meet him down the field, he's able to get his hands on Stewart, which slows him down enough for Kool-Aid to run with him. We see the same thing happen again on another rep in the game. McKinstry consistently does a good job with his hands as well, using an offhand jam when appropriate. His ability to squeeze wideouts to the sideline makes it very difficult for quarterbacks to fit passes down the sideline. He does have good ball skills, evident by his 29 forced incompletions the past 2 seasons and 4 interceptions in his short career, but I think he could have had a few more turnovers if he did a better job getting his head back to the ball. He does such a good job squeezing wideouts to the sideline, but there's more than a handful of reps where he's late turning his head. It might be due to the amount of back shoulder fades or curls teams try to run when he's end press, but once the route goes beyond 20 yards, you'd like to see him be more consistent, getting his eyes back around to find the ball. This play against Ennis Mitchell, who will go within the first 2 rounds of the draft, is a good example. He does a great job to squeeze Mitchell to the sideline and make the quarterback have to be perfect on the pass, but he's a few steps late getting his head around, and he never finds the ball. Mitchell makes a tough catch, but this could have been an interception for Kool-Aid. Still, his 46% completion rate allowed the past 2 seasons is nothing to scoff at. In off coverage, Kool-Aid is consistent as well, although I don't think he has the same burst and closing speed out of his break as Arnold, Mitchell, and Wiggins. Still, he is able to process routes as they progress and takes good angles to the ball. And when the pass does arrive, he's physical at the catch point. He has good fluidity in his hips to plant and redirect as well. Kool-Aid has an incredibly high football IQ and is someone that you can trust to do his job in coverage. His processing speed allows him to key and diagnose screens quickly, which amplifies his acceleration to beat blockers to the punch. In the run game, when he's not running down the sideline in press technique, he does a good job coming up to tackle. He's willing and able to take down bigger backs and tight ends. He might not be the most feared tackler in the corner group, but he ranks 35th out of 206 qualifying corners in the Power 5 and missed tackle percentage the past 2 seasons. Kool-Aid dominated in the hardest conference in college football for several years, and there's no reason to think he can't do the same in the NFL. While I think his Alabama counterpart in Terrion Arnold has a higher ceiling due to his athletic ability, McKinstry is more polished right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kool-Aid is the one that has a better rookie season of the 2. With the pre-draft rise of Arnold and Mitchell, there's a sense that Kool-Aid has fallen a bit in the draft. If I'm the Eagles and Kool-Aid is there at 22, I would have no hesitations running the card up with his name on it. In the crapshoot that is the NFL draft, Kool-Aid feels like one of the safer bets in this class. As we move on to the next 2 players, I want to note that I would consider a trade down here or take a different available player instead of picking either of these 2 guys. If the 4 players I mentioned before are already gone, then there's likely a good chance that a player like Jackson Powers Johnson is available, or a good pass rusher, whether that's on the interior or edge. Ennis Rakestraw is the next player, and I would also take him if the Eagles were able to trade back to the end of the first round. Rakestraw is a redshirt junior from Missouri with solid height and adequate weight. The Tigers website lists him at 6 foot and 188 pounds, and though we don't have his official measurements yet, he looks to have good length for the position. Rakestraw has good quickness, agility, and change of direction ability that really helps him mirror receivers well through the short and intermediate areas of the field. On film, he appears to have really good short area quickness, but I do wonder about his long speed. I'm interested to see how he runs at the combine, but he might have to rely more on good technique to be able to keep up with the league's faster receivers. Despite his size, he has excellent play strength that shows up in press when he's holding his ground against physical receivers at the top of the route, defeating blocks, and tackling. He has an extremely aggressive mindset and is very physical in the run game and on quick screens. This play against Georgia is a great example of his ability and willingness to take on pulling offensive linemen, swipe past him, and then still get into position to make the tackle. This play against Florida shows his tough and fearless play style. He doesn't back down as the runner approaches, instead taking the action to the runner. He ends up injuring himself in the play and doesn't make the tackle as a result, but it shows his willingness to seek out contact, which is something you don't see from a lot of corners. He showed his toughness to finish the game despite getting injured. He's very quick to diagnose and attack screens, whether they are on the perimeter or in the slot, and combined with his physical style, it's hard for receivers to stay in front of him. Combining run and pass plays, Rakestraw has the 7th most tackles for loss out of 206 qualifying corners over the past 2 seasons. And this also brings a lot of that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Pat Beverly type of energy, where he's a pest to opposing players. He's constantly jawing at them, and I'm not sure I've ever seen him tackle someone and not try to walk directly over them or accidentally bump into someone on his way back to the huddle. He's a spark plug that brings a lot of energy and attitude to the defense. In coverage, he's sticky matching receivers all over the field. There's little hesitation for him when having to change direction with the receiver's break. Oftentimes you see corners round or hesitate when wideouts break on dig routes over the middle, but Rakestraw has the body control and quick feet to smother those routes. He also does an excellent job on comebacks to stop his momentum and transition with the receiver back to the ball. When receivers are in front of him, his short area quickness comes to life, where he suddenly accelerates to attack the football. However, he does tend to wind up and swipe at the ball instead of poking it out. Rakestraw is physical at the line of scrimmage and press. He will erase receivers from the play with heavy strikes, and he has the hip fluidity needed to turn and run or to mirror the receiver throughout the route progression. Having said that, he can improve his technique in both press and off coverage. In off coverage, he tends to flip his hips too early, which gives receivers a lot of room to work underneath him. He needs to do a better job of being patient, neither staying in his pedal or laterally shuffling until the receiver gets further into his cushion. In press, he has a bad habit of false stepping towards the receiver, which puts him in a compromised position to be able to slide and stay in phase after the initial release. On top of that, his aggressive mentality can become a hindrance as he too often is focused on being physical after the release instead of taking good angles and getting into phase so that he can play the ball. This example against Vanderbilt shows exactly what I'm talking about. He does a good job staying in front of the receiver and not opening his hips too early. But instead of taking a good angle to intersect the receiver's route a little further down the field, he flattens his angle to get physical with him, and the receiver gets a step ahead. On top of that, by pushing the receiver, he creates more separation from the wideout, and then he ends up in chase mode and never gets in a good enough position to get his head around. It's a bad pass, so it doesn't matter, but if he took a good angle, he could have squeezed the wideout to the sideline naturally and been in position to lean into the receiver and look back for the ball. And considering I have questions about his top end speed, he will need to take good angles to not get beat deep when in press. Rakestraw ranks 39th out of 201 corners over the past 2 seasons in forced incompletion rate, but he only has 1 interception in his career, and plays like the one against Vanderbilt is a reason why. His 1 interception really encapsulates who Rakestraw is as a player right now. He quickly diagnoses the screen and aggressively attacks a blocker, which ends up putting him in the path of the throw, where he is able to tip it to himself for the turnover. But here's the thing, because he's the flat defender, he is also the force defender, meaning the play cannot get outside of him. If he doesn't run the blocker into the path of the throw, there's a very good chance this could become a big play for the offense. Rakestraw's aggressiveness also comes to light in zone coverage, sometimes biting up on underneath routes when he should be staying deep. Teams can also bait him into attacking screens just to run someone right behind him. Overall, Rakestraw has the tools and mentality to succeed in the NFL. He has enough long speed to succeed outside, but he also has the quickness, agility, and physical play style to be a great nickel corner, making him scheme diverse. I don't know if he's a plug-and-play starter from day 1 in the NFL, but with some time and refinement in his technique, he can develop into a solid starter. Finally, we have Kamari Lassiter from the University of Georgia, though I would only take him with one of our second-round picks. Lassiter is a smart player with multi-positional versatility at the next level. Georgia's website lists Lassiter at 6 foot and 180 pounds, though he plays bigger than his size, especially against screens on the perimeter and in run support. Athletically, Lassiter doesn't appear to have great long speed or burst, but his football IQ allows him to play faster than he is. His fluid hips also helps him transition and change directions to help cover for some of his limitations. Lassiter has good experience in press and off coverage, with over 354 reps in press in college. He generally plays with good technique in press, utilizing kick slides to mirror before opening his hips to run down the field. This helps prevent Lassiter from getting out of position early and having to get into chase mode where his recovery speed isn't great. He has good hips to be able to transition easily to carry routes down the field. Good hand fighting allows him to slow down receivers and squeeze them to the sideline so that he can put himself in a position to contest at the catch point. There are times in coverage that he does get run by though, and he ends up getting handsy down the field. There are several reps on film where this happens, and he'll have to improve on that at the next level or he'll get called for penalties more often. In off coverage, Lassiter plays with good vision on the quarterback and is quick to transition out of a side shuffle to break downhill. I think this is where he will fit in best at the next level, as his ability to read and diagnose route concepts is where he excels, and playing from depth will allow him to cover for his long speed. Lassiter shows a good tempo in his side shuffle, and he does an excellent job changing directions on curls, comebacks, and in-breaking routes. In addition to that, he smoothly transitions from his crossover run to break on routes coming back across his face. Lassiter really flashes his aggressive playstyle against screens. He quickly diagnoses and bursts downhill to beat blockers to the punch, and he runs through ball carriers. He's also unafraid to take on blockers of all size. Here we see him rip under an offensive lineman to get into position to help on a tackle. Against 2023 third-round running back selection Tank Bigsby, who outweighs him by 35 pounds, he does a good job to shock and shed with good hand placement and leverage to set the edge. He does have a light frame, so there are times where he can get pushed around, but in general, his physical mentality is a plus and also allows him the ability to move inside to the slot if needed. Lassiter doesn't have a ton of ball production in his career, as he only had one interception during his time in college, but he did greatly increase his forced incompletion rate from 2022 to 2023. And while he didn't have a ton of ball production, his last season in college saw him put up some of the best numbers in regards to completion percentage, passer rating, and yards per target allowed in the Power 5. Due to his athletic limitations, I don't think he'll have a ton of playmaking ability in his career, but he has a good chance of being a solid starter in the NFL. He'll need to play in a system that suits his skill set and is likely someone that you want as your CB2 instead of your CB1, but his football intelligence and physicality makes him an intriguing day 2 selection. I haven't even talked about some of the other corners like Mike Sanders still or TJ Tampa, but this has turned into quite a long video, so I'll leave it at these prospects for now. But with the number of good corners in this class, the Eagles shouldn't let an opportunity to get younger and better at the position go to waste.